Hello and welcome to Beyond Top 10 Tennis. My name is Dr. Ashley Morgan Berge and I'm your host. If you're not familiar with my work, would like to learn more about it, head on over to AM8 International, the first tennis lab of its kind worldwide that is centered on delivering top 10 tennis rankings and is 100% backed by science. This season we embarked on something new, something fresh, what I had been holding back, changeover segments delivered, how to beat the best players in the world and or how the best players in the world were winning. Look, with top 10 to Grand Slam differences. If you want more, that's where my 14 books come into play. So be sure to dive into them and become familiar with AIMA International and the now 200 episodes to date. That's right. Look, it's a new frontier. I'm no longer holding back. So buckle in and enjoy the ride. Look, welcome to another edition of Beyond Top 10 Tennis. I'm a bit excited today, bittersweet, but look, you would have noticed the slight, I'll say change of tense in the intro there, as in past opposed to current. Today's episode is number 200. Oh my goodness, and as promised, I am coming to you live today, 3 years from the date Beyond Top 10 Tennis was launched, 16th of May 2023. Oh my goodness. So obviously for context, it is 2026 now, 16th of May. That is crazy. And I did say we're going to come full circle. I did drop the ball, look, a couple of episodes ago, I think around early 190s, maybe it was episode 197, 96, I think it was, and how I said that we would essentially break up all the primary events from then until now with the final, I'll say, 1000 event prior to Roland Garros, which look, after, I'll say this weekend, you've got a week until kickoff of the, second Grand Slam of the season. And I still have itchy feet. I really do, as in I'm not too sure how I'm going to go not having an episode. I'm still tinkering. I honestly am thinking about a different format. Maybe I will give you some insights. More, I will say, player or game specific. I'm still toying with the idea. So look, as always, if you've got feedback, please send it through. But look, first and foremost, look, if you've been with us for some time now, thank you so much. We would not have made it to 200 episodes without you. If you are new, welcome. Oh my goodness, you have a huge catalog now behind you. Yeah, including today's episode, 200 episodes to go over. The data is immense. It is, I can't even fathom the work that's been, I'll say behind the scenes, but put into each and every episode. I'm going to leave that hopefully for the end of today's episode because I want to look at Rome. Yes, look, we've got one semi-final still underway. Sinner, Medvedev, rain delayed. Sinner's up 4-2 in the third. Let's see what happens. So then we will have the finals played out, I'll say tomorrow and the following day. I did share, I will say roughly 10 days ago, almost a fortnight ago, when we did air episode 199, that in order to stick to that promise of coming full circle on the same date, I wasn't going to be able to share with you those final results. I know it's just, I could have held off. I really could have held off, another 48 hours. But I really like the idea of number 200 on the same date as 3 years ago. You may disagree, but I do like the sound of that and how that does read. It absolutely is intentional. So I may do a write-up on that. If I do a little bit of a follow-up later on in the coming weeks, I may talk about that. That said, I think we've got a lot of data to touch on today. Looking at the results of Rome, even though we've got finalists already set for the WTA Tour, we've got one finalist set in stone, we'll say, on the ATP Tour, still waiting for that other semi-final to play out. But as we're looking at, specifically the semi-finalists to the finalists, we have a pretty good indication of what's, I'll say, coming our way in, I'll say, the next 3 weeks. I think it's around that 3-week mark where it will be that finalist weekend at Roland Garros. Oh my, just wow. That has come along very, very quickly. But I'm really liking the results we've got to carry over from Madrid. So keep in mind last week's episode, the 2 weeks ago, surmising, I'll say, Madrid to now Rome. If you're not familiar, head on over to AIM International and you'll see little snippets there. Very small, I'll say articles very loosely. It's really just, I think there's like about 2 small paragraphs there that are really quick summaries of the players that, finalists, champions, key insights of those episodes, and there's obviously a huge catalogue there. You'll also notice if you do head there, we did pause it, I think around episode 180 on the transcripts where I was sharing those deep dives, but it has been, let's just say, a very busy season so far. I'm sure eventually I will get around to updating that, but look, I'm sure it'll keep you busy. We don't have all 180. I think we started around episode 120, but look, if you've got 60 plus articles to go through or summaries of those previous episodes, again, I'm sure that will keep you busy. But you can see that we have a little bit of a backlog, and why, coming full circle again at 200, that 3-year mark, sounded like the best thing to do. Although again, I'm sure that I will find sometime, somewhere, to share those insights, because we'll see. I'm going to leave it in the air, no promises, purely because yes, I want to, but I have been pulled in a few different directions, and that's just me being very honest and open to all of you that have been with me for the last 3 years. I could not have done it without you. All right, so we do have Rome, as always. We'll kick off with the WTA Tour and then the ATP Tour. We're going to look at the live rankings this week, because there are no updates. Obviously, there won't be for another, let's say, 48 hours, maybe 72 hours sometimes in some cases. So we'll look at the live ones where we have a bit of an indication of what will be shown, we'll say, in a couple of days. But as far as the results are concerned, I want to have a look at last year's results. Now, we did go over this, I think, briefly in our previous episode, noticing how some of the best players in the world last season did not progress. So noteworthy, we've got Sabalenka fell in the quarterfinals of Rome last year. But still, that's not necessarily, I will say, a negative, because Struck fell around a 16. Just looking at some players that have recently been progressing. Look, Rybakina fell in 3rd round. Who else do we have? Just going down through, there we go. So Andreeva also fell in the quarters. For example, Navarro fell early on. Torsen did progress, but she fell in the round of 16. Ostapenko fell round of 16. So this is just going to put into perspective some of the results, progressions. Pegula fell in the 3rd round. Keys fell in the 3rd round. Osaka fell around to 16, because these have implications for, obviously, rankings, points being defended. Svitolina fell in the quarters, for example, and Swiatek fell in the 3rd round. So that's why a number of players you're going to see big progressions with points, and some of them, for example, Svitolina, not as many bonus points as I would have potentially thought, because she did make it all the way through to the quarterfinals. This year, obviously, she's made it through to the finals. Not as many points up her sleeve because of that. Gauff, for example, made it to the finals, so she won't have as many points to collect that could have put her ahead of Swiatek. However, since Swiatek progressed this season, she has more points. Rybakina, for example, she'll have more points up her sleeve as well because of that early round. Same with Pegula. Lots of things. Zheng, for example, lost in the semis last season, so she's going to have a bit of a regression. Stearns made it to the semis. She's going to have a bit of a regression as well. Quarterfinals from last season, just to top them off, was Sabalenka, Zheng, Gauff, Andreeva, Palini, Schneider, Stearns, and Svitolina. So we know that obviously is not the case. Let's do a really quick rundown at the quarters, so just keep that in mind. This season, Cestaya, Ostapenko, Gauff, Andreeva, Pegula, Swiatek, Svitolina, Rybakina. So look, a couple of familiar names. No Cestaya last year, no Ostapenko. Gauff, Andreeva, yes, and they actually met, 2 years running. No Pegula, no Swiatek last season. And no Rybakina, but yes, Svitolina. So you've got three players back-to-back in respect to Svitolina, Andreeva, and Gauff that have that level of consistency. So let's quickly pen that down because we know that's going to be different on, obviously, ATP Tour. All right, so as far as we'll say semis are concerned, last year semis, you've got Zheng, Gauff, Palini, Stearns. So we know this year the only player with that level of maintenance making the semi-finals is Gauff. So you really need to give it to her, especially being the defending champion in Paris final again. Gauff, she's made back-to-back finals, which is really impressive. Obviously, Sinner's potentially, if he does progress, back-to-back finals. But, you know, I'm not going to rule out Medvedev, although there is a break. He is leading by Sinner, so that's going to be a little bit tricky, but we'll get to that later. Recently, I will say earlier this season, Gauff's had that maintenance there. However, we haven't really seen, Sabalenka, Rybakina have had the spotlight. Swiatek, Gauff have been, switching with 3-4 respectively. Looks like Swiatek's found that momentum again. Pretty happy with that. That said, Gauff, she has been steadily tracking a little bit ahead of Swiatek, which I like. All right, so we'll get into that later. Let's go from first rounds through to the final. Obviously, the finals are yet to play out, so keep that in mind. And I will read out the buys to begin with. All right. Sabalenka with the bye. Krejcikova over Jackie Mo. Good win there for Krejcikova. Keep in mind, Krejcikova has won Paris before. Good to see her performing, I'll say, initially well on the clay. But look, she's won Wimbledon as well, so we know how well Krejcikova can play. She's just had a really, I'll say, bad run with injuries the last couple of years, unfortunately. Score there was 2 and 4. Maria over Lynette. Good win there. Love and 3. So stay with a bye. Torsen with a bye. Olienkova over Marcinko. 1 and 3. Zakharova over Yastremska, that's an upset there. 4-6, 7-5, 7-6, 8-6 in that tiebreak. Noskova with a bye, Benchik with a bye. Andreescu over Kenin. Look, Andreescu had to qualify. This is a very good win for her. 4 and 5. I think it's about 12 months ago now where Andreescu did come back onto it, unless it's 24, but let's stick with 12. Look, Siniakova over Boisson, last year's semi-finalist, I believe, at Roland Garros, right? So that is a very, very... well done to Siniakova, but look, 2 and 3, haven't really seen Boisson in action much. I think this is the first time we've seen her in action on the clay. Let's see if she plays any of the smaller tiered events in the next week. If not, I think she's got a very hard task in Paris to defend those points, purely because I think she's been out with injury. Predominantly basically most of the last 9 to 12 months. So we may see her slip right outside, let's say, the top 50 back to maybe she'll stay within the top 80, we'll see, but maybe, just maybe, Lois can get a few rounds at Paris. That'll be really interesting to see. Absolutely one of the players to keep an eye on. Kalinskaya with a bye, Buska with a bye. Look, Zheng got a win over Bondar, 3-6, 6-3, 6-4. Even though I'll say Zheng's had a regression in the ranking, she's still inside the top 30, finding her way back. I'm not going to write her off. I don't think she'll be able to, let's say, track all the way. But I'm probably not going to be surprised if Zheng gets to third round, maybe fourth round. Only because you need to keep in mind, she did win the gold a few seasons ago now. Again, on the clay, and she did get that win over Swiatek. So when you factor that in, a player that's been able to accomplish that, you can't write them off. But again, it'll be interesting. I'm sure Zheng does have a few points to defend nonetheless. All right. Ostapenko over Stefani, love and won. Same as Ostapenko. We know she's won on the clay before. Curious to see if she finds that momentum that got her inside the top 10 a few seasons ago now, and she really hovered outside for, again, 1, 2, maybe 3 seasons. I think that we're going back about 18 months ago now. But maybe she will find that form again. Rus with a bye, Gauff with a bye. Valentova over Putintseva, 3-2. We've got Sierra over Korpash, 3-1. Kalinina with a bye. Buskova with a bye. Townsend over Brankianko, 3-2. Kessler over Bronzetti. We've got 6-3, 5-7, 6-3. Jovic with a bye. Paolini with a bye. Jean over Hadidmi. Good win there, 7-6, 6-4. Orvari over Koniva, 2-6. Mertens with a bye. Joint with a bye. Gulbik over Orgesi, 1-1. Ruzik over Rakimova, 6-4, 1-6, 6-3. Ondriva with a bye. Pagula with a bye. Sonmez over Rogeri, 4-6, 6-2, 6-2. Masarova over Salimiteva, 7-5, 5-7, 6-1. Fernandez with a bye. Samsonova with a bye. Lee over Zhang, 1-6, 6-4, 6-2. Potapova over Gauff, 5-7, 6-2, 6-4. Makova with a bye. Osaka with a bye. Lies over Balta. This is a good win for Lies, I'll say, but not that unexpected. 6-4, 3-6, 6-4. Remember, Katie was top 30, let's say 2 seasons ago, roughly now. Has really struggled, I'll say, to get that momentum back. But again, it wouldn't have been, I will say, that surprising if she did start progressing. Gibson over Trevisan, 6-4, love 6, 6-3. Good win for Talia there, especially at a 1,000 event. Talia absolutely would have had to qualify here, so that's a good win for her. Schneider with a bye, Navarro with a bye, Kokiureta over Kraus, 2-4. McNally over Kazakina, 2-3. That's a tough one. Kazakina, look, former top 10, really 12 months ago, top 10, still regressed, I'll say, late last year, really around that 80 ranking range. A bit of a slap there as far as the rankings are concerned. I believe there was just a lot of no breaks predominantly with the Kazakina's schedule. And I think she's been enjoying herself more, fingers crossed. But it's tough. It's really tough for her. Hoping she gets back. She absolutely has the capacity to get back. I'll say top 30. Swiatek with a bye. Svitolina with a bye. Vasilati over Tomljanovic, 5-4. Waltert over Stadabatseva. I'm going to call that actually an upset, only because Stadabatseva has been tracking lately. 7-5, 4-6, 6-1. Baptiste with a bye. Keys with a bye. Stearns over to Jean, 4-4. Grant over Bagato, 1-6, 6-2, 6-4. Batakonka with a bye. Alexandrova with a bye. Seigman over Bajek, 4-4. Pliskova over Bozezaminiero. That is actually a very good win for Pliskova. 4-6, 6-3, 7-5. Christian with a bye. Wang with a bye. Ayala over Fretch. Very good win there for Ayala. 6 love, 3-6, 6-4. Sakari over Tager, 5-7, 6-3, 6 love. And Rybakina with a bye. Oh my goodness, that was a mouthful. All right, second round. So all the seeds are now in action. That's what we're hanging out for. So Sabalenka over Krejcikova, 2-3. That's a tough, but I think that highlights Sabalenka's level. It's a good thing. Sestaya over Maria, 2-0. Olenkova over Torsen, 6-1, 3-1. Torsen had to retire. Not too sure what happened, what it was. Let's hope Torsen's recovers well in time for the French. Niskova over Zakharova, 4-1. Benjik over Andreescu, 4-1. Kalinskaya over Siniakova, 4-6, 7-6, 7-5. Really shows how well Siniakova has been playing singles-wise lately. We know how she can play doubles, number one. But well done Kalinskaya, but well done Siniakova. I think she absolutely could get to the third round at the French if she plays like that. Zheng over Buska, there you go, 7-6-6-2. So Buska's seeded 30. Zheng is not seeded, but remember, she's got a lot of points to defend. But that's a good win, I'll say, for Zheng. Ostapenko over Rus, 2-6, 2 and 3. Gauff over Valentova, 3 and 4. Sierra over Kalinina, 2 and 3. Townsend over Buskova, that's an upset, but we do know Townsend can really pull that level out from time to time. Buskova has been tracking, so a good win for Taylor, 3 and 5. Jovic over Kessler, 7-6 and 7-6, with the tie breaks there, it was 7-5 and 7-4 respectively. Paolini over Jean, 6-7, 6-2, 6-4. Look, I like that result. That said, Paolini really hasn't been able to find her form lately. Not sure what has been going on there, but as a defending champion, it's a tough one. All right, Mertens over Udvari, 4 and 2. Gulbik over Joint, so that's an upset. But look, Joint's had a bit of a regression lately, I'll say, 5 and 2. Andreeva over Ruzic, 1 and 0. Pegula over Sonmans, 4 and 0. Masarova over Fernandez, an upset there, 4-6, 6-4, 6-4. Samsonova over Lee, 4 and 3. Good win, especially because Lee has been playing some very good tennis lately. Another upset, Potapova over Makova, 3 and 2. However, remember last week, 2 weeks ago, my apologies, Potapova has been playing some really solid tennis, so she's carried that forward with her. Makova, however, would have expected her to progress, but well done Potapova creating that new baseline. Osaka over Lies, really pushed here, 6-4, 4-6, 6-3. I'll call that a positive indicator for Lies. Schneider over Gibson, 5-7, 1 and 1. Cocchioretto's upset Navarro, 3 and 3. Navarro's had, let's say, not the best season. I did read something, I think it was this week, Navarro has taken time off. So something, I want to say, she's just been having a reset, let's say. So, or dealing with, I think, some health, we'll say, issues. So I'm hoping Navarro gets a full recovery and she really can track back towards that top 10 status that she was at about 2 seasons ago now. 18 months, 2 seasons ago. All right. Swiatek over McNally. Look, this was a bit tighter than I think we would have anticipated. 6-1, 6-7, 6-3. Svitolina over Basiliti, 1 and 3. Baptiste over Walter, 6-7, 6-4, 6-4. Keys over Stearns. Now, that's brutal, purely because Stearns, big points to defend, so we will see a regression in the rankings. 4-6, 6-4, 6-2. Balkova over Grant, 4-6, 3 and 4. Seigman over Alexandrova, that's an upset there. Well done, Seigman. A 6-4, 6-7, 6-1. Pliskova has upset Christian, 33rd seed. Very good win for Pliskova. 6-7, 7-6, 6-4. We've got Iala over Wang. That's an upset as well, 4 and 3. Rybakina, very smooth against Sakari there, 4 and 1. All right, let's head on over to the third round now, where we do have a couple of upsets to go over. The first one, which is the biggest, is Sabalenka Cirstea. Cirstea, look, she's seeded 26th seed, but she's upset Sabalenka, and I think that's a very big metric. That said, I don't want to get too carried away with it because irrespective, I think, of Sabalenka falling in the third round, she's been playing some really good tennis lately. So I'm not going to write her off to not progress in Paris. It's a little bit of a hiccup. Look, Cirstea was 2-6, 6-3, 7-5. Look, it may raise some questions, for example, with how well, I guess, Sabalenka's playing. But I don't think that it would be fair. I'm not going to be surprised, for example, if Sabalenka, look, makes it to the quarters, semis, maybe even finals. Definitely not going to write her off to making the finals. I still think she has that, but I really want to see how she performs in the earlier rounds to see how well she does. And it's similar with all, I will say, the top 10 players, how they progress in those earlier rounds to see which, I guess, of the top of that 10% or 1%, depending on, I guess, the data hall you're looking at, is looking at progressing towards, say, that round of 16. And absolutely, not all top 10 players at this stage will progress towards the round of 16, but that's on both tours. All right, Noskova over Olienkova, 1 and 3. Upset here, Kalinskaya over Benchik, 4 and 3. I like that for Kalinskaya, finding her form again. Bit of a tough one for Benchik. I think because of this result, she's bumped just outside the top 10. Ostapenko with a win over Zhang, 4-6, 6-4, 6-4. I really like this from Ostapenko. Gauff over Sierra. Look, lost the first set there, 5-7, 6-love, 6-4. Jovic over Townsend, 5 and 2. This is the biggest upset. Defending champion Paolini going down to Mertens, 4-6, 7-6, 6-3. It's a tough one. Really want to see how Paolini plays in Paris. Really rooting for her to find that form again that got her to, I'll say, the finals 2 seasons ago. But look, we don't have that much, I'll say, positive indicators to go by with a bit of a regression this season. So time will tell. I think she was a little bit overplayed with both singles and doubles. Doing really great as far as doubles were concerned. Maybe not living up to the hype of that top 10 ranking, top 5 where she was. But I still think she does have that game to really push. So, again, curious to see how she performs again on the clay. But look, not as many points to defend at Roland Garros in Wimbledon this season as she did have last season. So that's noteworthy. All right, Andreeva over Gulbik, 6-1, 4-6, 6-love. Pegula over Masarova, love and love. And I really like that scoreline, not just because it was a double bagel, but it just shows how well Pegula's been locked in. Potapova's upset Sampson over 3 and 2, maintaining that form. Osaka over Schneider, good win there, 1 and 2. Swiatek over Kokureto, 6-1, 6-love. More like it, I guess, those type of scorelines we're used to seeing from Swiatek, especially on the clay. Svitolina over Baptiste, 1 and 2. That really shows how well Svitolina's also locked in. Look, Batakunva's upset Keys, 6-3, 1-6, 6-4. Pliskova over Seidman, 1 and 4. Rybakina then with a win over Yala, 4 and 3. So most of that, I will say, paved out, aside from, I'll say, some of those earlier significant upsets. So round of 16 here, we still do have a number of upsets. All right, starting at the beginning. So Stayers upset Noskova, so 26th seed and 13th seed respectively, 2 and 4. Well done to Staya. I believe after this she will get a career high ranking. Ostapenko over Kalinskaya, 6-1, 6-2. I really like this because let's just have a look again from last season where Ostapenko made it. I do believe, she did make the round of 16, which means Ostapenko having made, she's got to add points, right? Because 16 through to the quarters. So that's a very good metric. We didn't do this 16 from last season to this season. So if we want to have a quick look, last season, let's just run them off. Round of 16, Sabalenka, Kostyuk, Andriescu, Zhang, Gauff, Raducanu, Torsen, Andreeva, Paolini, Ostapenko, Schneider, Mertens, Stearns, Osaka, Svitolina, Collins. So Staya, Noskova, Kalinskaya, Ostapenko, Gauff, Mertens, Andreeva, Pegula, Potapova, Osaka, Swiatek, Svitolina, Batakunkova, Pliskova, Rybakina. I think that leaves us at 5. Those 5 being Svitolina, Osaka, Ostapenko, Andreeva and Gauff were the only ones that progressed through. That's interesting. So we might pin that down just as a comparative analysis when we look at the ATP Tour, for example. Occasionally I do miss 1 or 2, but let's stick with that. All right, so let's go through the results there. We looked at the Ostapenko over Kalinskaya. We're up to Gauff over Jovic. And look, Jovic really did push Gauff. And I like this because Gauff is absolutely in form. But Jovic pushing Gauff to 3. Look, 5-7, 7-5, 6-2. Really says something about Jovic's game. Very curious to see if Jovic does push at Paris. I'm not going to be shocked if Jovic does make the round of 16. which will be, I think, a very good metric for her. And something to be discussed, I think, I'll say in a later publication with how she's been tracking, especially this past season. All right, Andreeva over Mertens, 3-3, really holding her ground. I'm liking Andreeva's odds in Paris. We know how well she's played there previously. Is it time for Andreeva to make a final there? Maybe. Though Gauff's been playing quite well lately, but Andreeva making the semis, quarters semis, depending again on her draw, I really think she could cause ruffle a few feathers. And I know I say that tongue-in-cheek because of her ranking, but she does have a very good history there. And I think that, again, is something to see how she plays earlier in those rounds. All right, Pegula over Potapova, 7-6-6-2. And I like this because it shows Potapova's, she's playing some of the best tennis she's played, let's say, almost in her life. And Pegula getting that win, it's a good indicator for how well Pegula's been playing. Swiatek over Osaka, 6-2, 6-1. Look, Osaka's been playing some good tennis. Very clean game from Swiatek. We like that. Looks like Swiatek's starting to find that clay court form again. Svitolina over Bankova, over 2-3, and Rybakina over Pliskova, love N2. No surprises there, just some really clean tennis. All right. Quarters are concerned, another big upset. Look at this. Sersteya over Ostapenko, 6-1, 7-6. 7-love in that tiebreak. Really good metrics there. Everything good for Sersteya, playing some of the best tennis of her career. But look, Ostapenko making the quarters, definitely not going to write her off at the French. She could very well be a surprise packet making the round of 16. Absolutely. All right, Gauff over Andreeva here. So 4-6, 6-2, 6-4. So that's what I'll say, insinuating a short time ago. Gauff getting the win over Andreeva as the defending champion. This is all good, digging deep. But Andreeva, there's only a few breaks in this match. So what I like about this from Andreeva's chances, she absolutely could make the semis, potentially finals. I really think she's ready to make that maiden finalist, potentially become a Grand Slam champion. If not in Paris, I think she has the best odds actually for a game in Paris. Not too sure at Wimbledon, US Open, for example, with, I'll say, her best results coming on the clay as far as Grand Slams are concerned. So I think this is really one to watch. Very similar. Hold on. Swiatek with the win over Pegula, 6-1, 6-2. Very good win there. Very clean. And then Svitolina over Rybakina, 2-6, 6-4, 6-4. You can call that an upset, but Svitolina, she's been playing some great tennis lately. But Svitolina, she really has been digging deep. What this tells me about these top ones, look, Sabalenka's not here, but look, Ostapenko is going to be a dark horse, I think, to make the round of 16. Gauff, Andreeva, they're almost penned in for the round of 16. I'll say quarterfinals, almost semifinals there. Pegula, quarters, maybe, just maybe, depending on her draw, could push further. Swiatek fighting this form, you really like her odds, quarters, semifinals. I'll stick to semifinals, maybe lifting the title again, but that depends on a lot of factors. Svitolina, Rybakina. Look, Rybakina, I think, is going to be dangerous to make the quarters. But, Svitolina getting this type of edge, it's really interesting. I'll settle with quarters. So you need to obviously throw Sabalenka in there. So I've already essentially ruled you got Rybakina, Svitolina, Swiatek, Pegula, Gauff, Andreeva, or that's 6 of them. And then Sabalenka makes 7 already for the quarters. And I think the 8th person will be a dark horse, whether it's, Paolini, another player. But there's probably, even though I've given you like 6, potentially 7, odds are we're going to see an upset. One of those players, one of those 7 players that I've just named, we will see an early exit prior to the round of 16. We know as far as the data is concerned, there's always that anomaly that does peek through. But, let's see. I'm very interested to see how this does play out. All right, semi-finals back to Rome. Gauff over Sersteya, 4-3. Svitolina over Swiatek. Now, this is why I really like how Svitolina's been playing, but also I like for Swiatek getting that semi-final result. She had to exit Madrid early, unwell, had, I'll say, that surprise exit. But sounds like she's been, or it looks like she's been finding that form again that, secured X amounts of Roland Garros titles, that Wimbledon title last season, starting to find her form on the clay again, potentially. But we've only seen a couple of matches, and I don't believe she'll be playing prior to the French. So we only have a small snippet of how well Swiatek's been playing. Which, again, quarterfinals, semis, maybe not the title, just maybe not. You've got other players who have been tracking more so this season. That said, if Swiatek really locks in, absolutely will not write her off. I think it's going to depend on how she plays on those earlier rounds. Similar to, look, I think Gauff can dig deep. Andreeva can dig deep. We've seen Sabalenka dig deep. We haven't seen enough, I'll say, tennis from Swiatek this season of digging deep. It's either really a clean sweep or losing or falling, I'll say, at that final hurdle in that third set, and the other player runs away with it. So I'm going to call that like a mental hurdle, not necessarily her game, but that's a mental hurdle. And I've been harking on that for the best part of the last 12 months, in all fairness. And I'm really hoping this new coach-athlete relationship with Roy Swiatek plays out in her favour. I think she really needs that. But it's going to be very interesting because I still stand by the mental element of her game holding her back in those cases, and there hasn't been a switch that I'm aware of as far as that's concerned. So that's going to be a very interesting discussion in the next, 2-3 weeks. And again, why I feel like I probably will have to, just simply by being compelled to, share those insights in some way, shape or form, whether that is written or some special episodes, we will see. But again, I'm trying not to promise any of that. All right, as far as the finals are concerned, you've got Gauff and Svitolina playing it out in the next, let's say, 48 hours. Well, I think it's 24 hours in all fairness. Love that Gauff's there defending. Svitolina, either way, I'm not too sure. Look, Svitolina, she's going to have that break. She's going to go into Roland Garros with a lot of confidence in making the finals. Absolutely would love to see Svitolina lift a Grand Slam, become a Grand Slam finalist. That is the only thing not in her, I will say, record book. She's been a season top 10 player when Serena was number 1. Arguably one of the hardest times to get inside the top 5, and Svitolina, she just held her ground, made semi-finals, quarters, etc. That is why I think it would be very exciting for her to go all the way. That said, she's going to have Sabalenka to fight against. Look, she's got the advantage really on Swiatek mentally with that win, but I'm going to say Swiatek may be able to get that next win. Gauff, it's going to really depend on what happens in the finals. It's a tough one. I still think Andreeva has really good chances. Rybakina, even though she's falling in the quarters, she made the quarters. Almost think that she could make quarters semis again in Paris. Not too sure. Could argue that clay's not really Rybakina's surface, but here she is making the quarters in Rome. So I'm not going to say that. Same with Pegula making the quarters here. We've got a lot of players to throw in the mix. Really need to see how they track in those earlier rounds when we have a number of players almost on a level playing field in some way, shape or form. So that'll be interesting, irrespective of the result. If Gauff wins or not, or Svitolina wins or not, both those two players are going to go in form for Paris. It will really depend on how their recovery is the next week. But I think this is a very good momentum for both players, even those top 4, when you consider Svitolina, Swiatek and Gauff. Stayer, I'm going to argue that she's not used to this level as consistently, but maybe she makes a third round, maybe round of 16, but I would also argue that that would be the limit this season, and then she can work on tracking. So there's a lot of, I'll say, leg work behind, so the data as well these players that peak and whether they can hold on to that peak. Potapova, for example, over the last few weeks, and then there was that cut point. So I'm very invested, a number of players here, but we need to also remember what happened at Madrid, back-to-back Rome, what's been happening. Gauff really is the standout with that momentum. Sabalenka, yes, fell back a little bit, disappointing for, I will say, Paolini. I think Pegula could also be a bit of a dark horse, underrated. Look, irrespective, top 5, I guess she's always not in the limelight because of the top 4 predominantly in the limelight. Could all 1, 2, 3, 4 make the semifinals? Yes. I would probably, though, between 3 of the top 4, 3 of the top 5 making the semis, with an anomaly in there. And obviously that anomaly could be anyone ranked outside the top 4, top 5. But that'll be very, very interesting. All right, let's head on over to the live rankings. There are no updates in, as I said at the beginning of today's episode, purely because our rankings won't be updated for another 48 hours. But noteworthy, Badosa is at 102, just to show, look, 12 months ago, top 10, I believe, and a bit of a steep regression. I'm not going to hark on all the rankings because there's a lot of changes this week. But I want to point out, look, Stearns, for example, big regression. She's at 92 now in the world because of losing in the second round in Rome. I think that's the biggest knock at, I'll say, this end of the spectrum as far as the rankings are concerned. Back 43 points. That's a really big hit. Look, Kennan's back 13, so she's at 87. Kudermetova, so Veronica there, she's back 16 at 86. Again, live rankings. So this will predominantly be reflected again, next week's rankings when they're live. Gulbik's up 8, so 82, courtesy of, look, third round, we'll say, in Rome. Again, a lot of movement, as we typically do see after a fortnight of rankings being updated. Look, Townsend's up 24, so it's to 72. Kind of has been back and forth this season in the singles rankings. Look, Vekic, she's gained a little bit of ground, but she's been playing, I'll say, the smaller tier, so the 125s, for example, that we haven't really been touching on. In Beyond Top 10 Tennis this season, we've really been focusing on predominantly 500 to 1000s, the odd 250. But look, up 19 places to 70. So I think playing those smaller tier events have been doing some good. Look, Batakunkova, new career high here at 65 in the world, up 29 places. 20 years of age, my apologies, from Czechia. So is a player, I'll say, to keep an eye on. Look, a lot of movement again and again. Sonmez, new career high at 59 in the world, so she's up 6 there. McNally's up 7 to 56. Look, Gibson, she's up 7 to 55 because she did qualify, even though she lost early. Stabatseva, she's up a little bit more. Zhang's taken the biggest hit, so she's back 21 places now to 53 in the world. Very brutal, because that does mean she will not be seeded in Paris. And I do think if Zhang does play against a seed in the earlier rounds, she's going to be a dark horse. Absolutely a dark horse, and that is going to be very rough. Look, Boisson's back 6, so she's at 49. That's going to be rough to defend her points in Paris. Look, she most likely will stay inside the top 100, but a lot of points to defend. It's a bit of a tough one there. So again, will be interesting, I will say, to review in the next couple of weeks. Look, Valentova's up 5 to 43. Krejcikova, look, she's up 11, which is nice, to 42 in the world, courtesy of that just second round. They're the biggest movers. Look, Raducanu, she's back 7 to 37, which again is actually tough. So she will not be seeded in Paris. Is a bit brutal for a couple of these players. Who else do we have? So Christian, she's actually surprisingly back 5 places. So she's at 33. will not be seeded then. So the seeding predominantly will probably go off Wang at 32 now. So she's at 1 forward, so all players forward. So Ostapenko, she's back inside the top 30, up 7 to 29 in the world, which means she will be seeded. Potapova's up 10 at 28, so she will be seeded. All good metrics here. Boskova's 27, will be seeded. Baptiste, looks like, I think this will be the first time Baptiste has been seeded at a Grand Slam. Same with Potapova, I do believe, which they're very positive performance metrics in and of themselves. Kalinskaya, so she's at 22, Gord up 2. Sersteya with really good run, career high. 36 years of age. It's really exciting to have a career high at that age. I'll say the later half of your career at 21 in the world. So she'll be seeded as well, which again, great. All other players, we haven't seen any significant jumps. I think, look, the biggest jump is Paolini, but it's a regression. So she's been bumped outside the top 10 to 13 in the world. Bit brutal there, but look, I still like her chances because Paolini now doesn't have points or significant points to defend, I don't believe, for the next couple of months. Which means it kind of gives her a reset, like in a really good way mentally. So I think now with this kind of clean slate, gives her an opportunity to see what's next. What's that new baseline she can develop? And is it, it's not necessarily dependent on those 1,000 wins, those Grand Slam finalist wins from, 2 seasons ago. And I like that for her, less pressure. Similar, we'll say, to Swiatek from what happened, let's say, the last 6 months. Less pressure to defend titles. Although obviously still has Wimbledon this season. Sabalenka, or I'll say Rybakina, she hasn't had to defend points predominantly most of this season. Sabalenka has the one to defend, and Gauff, for example, but they really have been living up to, I'll say, those standards. Anisimova, though, she's just back slightly, but look, top 7 have not changed. But that's the interesting part, I think, with Anisimova needing to defend. Her finalist results will be very interesting in the second half of the season. All right, so Anisimova did not play. Pegula's steady, so she's still at 5. But the interesting thing here, we'll say, is between Swiatek and Gauff. It's really dancing between the two. Looks like Gauff will, if she does win in Rome, she's still going to be, let's say, about 250 points behind Swiatek. So they're very, very close. That said, there's over 1,000 points, about 1,500 points between Swiatek and Rybakina. Keeping in mind, Rybakina, again, doesn't have that many points to defend. So that's actually a very big gap. Gauff, look, if she does not defend in Paris, and, still, I think she's still going to maintain her position, though she will be knocked back a few points. She'll still maintain a ranking inside the top 10. Inside, actually, it looks like the top 7, ironically, or let's say top 8, which again is interesting. But, there's so many, I think, different pieces to the puzzle when you look at how well will Pegula go. She's only 500, say, behind Gauff. It's very, very close, these 3, 4, and 5. Even 6 with Anisimova, let's say a bit over 250, for example, between Pegula and Anisimova. So it's really not much. The biggest gap is on Driva and Anisimova. You've got roughly almost that 2,000, 1,800 points. Then it's very close again for the rest of the top 10. Look, Sabalenka, Rybakina, top 2. But the gap has been closing. You have you've got 1,200 points separating 1 and 2 in the world, which is the closest it has been for some time. Let's say, for argument's sake, Swiatek does win. She's still going to, she'll get to 2 again, which I think will be very exciting. But if Rybakina plays really well, maybe not the case. She will add to her tally. So there's a lot of moving pieces, lots of things to consider here. Even if Sabalenka loses early, I think she's still going to hold on to number 1. I don't think she would lose her hold there. So I think the biggest markers over the next, month, 6, 7-8 weeks is Swiatek if she defends Wimbledon, Gauff if she defends Roland Garros. Sabalenka's the weight there, or the pressure's not till later on in the season. Rybakina's got more points to defend later on the season. But look, I think a dark horse potentially will come through, because if these players do not defend those titles, which odds are they probably won't at this stage, but I still want to leave room for them too. Only because there's too many other players to put into the equation. How well Pegula performs, Anisimova, Andrea if she steps up, Svitolina playing quite well now. Mboko, maybe, let's see what happens. Paolini, let's see what happens. But look, you still have to say the favourites to win a Grand Slam are still, look, the top 4 players, top 5 players. Maybe Andreeva in there. Really want to add her there. I do think she's going to claw her way back inside the top 5. But look, it's very, very interesting. All right, getting a bit carried away. Let's head on over to the ATP Tour now. Looking at Rome, then the rankings, then we may do a bit of a comparative. It's going to be a long one today, but it is episode 200, so I really want to try to polish off a lot of, I'll say, elements. Let's first look at last season. What happened last season in Rome? It'll tell us a few things. Round of 16, we had Mazzetti, Medvedev, Hurkacz, Menzik, Kakanakov, Alcaraz, Draper, Mute, Minar, Rudd, Fils, Zverev, Paul, Diminor, Sinner, and Cerundolo. That is a round of 16, and we know that is not the case here. Let's see how many we can tick off. I'm going to completely forget how many. All right, round of 16 here. Let's go. Sinner, Pellegrino, Rublev, Bashvili, Medvedev, Landaluce, Tarante, Medvedev, Mazzetti, Rudd, Kakanakov, Pridzmik, Jodar, Tien, Darderi, Zverev. So I don't know how many you counted, but let's go through there again. We counted Mazzetti, we counted Medvedev, no Hurkacz, no Menzik, no Draper, no Mute, Kakanakov, yes, no Berrettini, no, that's 32, no hold on, all right, no Minar, yes, Rudd, no Fils. I don't think we counted Zverev. Did you count Zverev? I don't think I counted Zverev. Zverev did, yeah. Just double checking, no Fils, no Paul, no Diminor, Sinner, yes. So what I like about this is we have 5. So 5 and 5, same with the WTA Tour. So very quickly then, let's have a look at what we've got at the quarters. All right, so quarter finalists last season, Draper, Alcaraz, and then... Hold on, Draper, Alcaraz, no, Hurkacz, Paul, no, Mazzetti, no, Zverev, no, Alcaraz, no, and Sinner and Rudd. So Sinner and Rudd, I think, are the only ones we are carrying through. Sinner, Rublev, Landaluce, Medvedev, Rudd, Kakanakov, Jadar, Derry. Looks like just 2, which, look... 2, well, there was just 1 quarter on the WTA. And if we push forward, if we go Sinner, Medvedev, Rudd, Dairy, last season semis, Mazzetti, Alcaraz, Sinner, Rudd. Look, no, that was a quarter. Rudd fell in the quarters, which means you only had Sinner, Paul, Alcaraz, Mazzetti. So again, it's just with the 1. Similar to, there you go, WTA Tour. So there's a relative consistency there, which is always nice to see. All right, let's dive into the results. And again, I will start with, or we will keep the buys in play just so it's evening out, I suppose, the draw. Okay, here we go. Sinner with the buy, Offner over Michelson, 3-3. Poprin over Berrettini. I'm going to call that kind of an upset there because Berrettini's been playing some good tennis lately. Rankings-wise, I think Poprin's slightly ahead. That's 2-3. Menzik with the buy, TFO with a buy. Boos over Sonego, 3-3. Pellegrino's a qualifier over Nardi, who got a wild card. 4-6-6-3-6-3. Fils with a bye. Rublev with a bye. Kekanovic over Shevchenko, 2 and 3. Garin over Steamrolls, 6 and 5. Dowdish Fokina with a bye. Nakashima with a bye. Bautista Agut over Mastrelli, 3 and 6. Bashvili over Merida, 6-4, 2-6, 6-3. Shelton with a bye. I've got Elisame with a bye. Devone over Shapovalov. I'll call that a bit of an upset there, 4 and 2. Milovic over Roya, 4 and 3. Fonseca with a bye. Echeverry with a bye. Bellucci over Brahuka, 4 and 4. Silic over Giron, 5 and 4. Landaluce with a bye and lucky loser there. Not too sure who withdrew. Could have been Djokovic. Not too sure here. Kaboli with a bye. Adame over Bergs, 3 and 4. I don't think it was. I'll correct that shortly. Torrante over Candeso, 6-7, 6-4, 6 love. Nori with a bye. Mute with a bye. Lamez Ruiz over Quinn, 6-3, 5-7, 6-3. Macaque over Tsitsipas. That's a brutal one, but tough first round there for Tsitsipas. 6-4, 7-6. Medvedev with a bye. Mazzetti with a bye. Mapeshi Pericard. Good win over Fernley, 7-6, 4-6, 6-2. Tibillo over Carino Busta, 2 and 1. Surundolo with a bye. Rudd with a bye. Shivada over Trongelli. Love 6-6-4, 7-6. Struff over Komasana, 2 and 4. Laheka with a bye. Kakanakov with a bye. Shevchenko over Carabelli, 6-4, 4-6, 7-6. Van der Zen Schulp over Mueller, 5 and 3. Kokovic, lucky loser as well, got a bye. Humbert with a bye. Kopriva over Manazan, 3 and 3. Prismic over Fuchsovic, 4 and 3. And Djokovic with a bye, and that is why I'm correcting what I said, who withdrew earlier, because obviously it was not Djokovic. Again, I'll leave that open. All right, Diminor with a bye. Analdi over Monard, 6-3, 3-6, 6-3. Borges over De Jong, 6-3, 6 love. Jodar with a bye, Team with a bye. Zamir over Manarino, 6-4, 6 love. Baez over Brooksby, 6-3, 7-6. Bublik with a bye, Paul with a bye. Vukic over Kipson, 6-3, 5-7, 6 love. A little bit of an upset here, I'm going to call it. Haffman over Hercax. Hercax did have a number of points to defend from last season, unfortunately. So we will see a bit of a regression in the rankings there. 6-7, 7-6, 6-2. That's a tough one. Darderi with a bye. Greek and Spore with a bye. Blocks over Sinner, 4-6, 6-1, 6-3. Altima over Zhang, 4-6, 7-6, 6-4. And Zarev with a bye. A big mouthful there. Not too many upsets there. Mostly pretty much straightforward. So second round seeds are in action, and if you have read the results, you know we have a very big upset coming up shortly. All right, Sinner over Offner, 3 and 4. Poprin over Menzik, 6-3, 2-6, 6-3, 6-4, my apologies. That has to be the best win of Poprin almost this season, because he's had a lot of, I'll say, unlucky runs, just hasn't been able to, find that form. But look, Menzik's in form, and that is a very good win there. All right, TFO over Bus, 6-7, 6-3, 6-2. Pellegrino, look, this is a big upset actually, over Phil's, 4 love. So Phil's obviously had to retire there. And Phil's is absolutely playing some of the best tennis of his career lately. Arguably equal and or more of than last season before he was forced out with injury. And he's just been playing. Look, Phil's absolutely, despite this, if he enters Paris healthy, I will not be surprised if he pushes to the quarters, let alone the semis, and makes that maiden, say, quarters, semis of a Grand Slam. He's playing that well, but it's going to depend now on if he is healthy. Rublev over Kekanovic, 4 and 4. Davidovich Fokina over Garin, 7-6, 6-4. Nakashima over Bautista Agut, 4 and 0. Look, Bashvili's upset Shelton, 6-4, 6-7, 6-3. Shelton started the year off really, really good, playing some great tennis. These results, look, he played well a few weeks ago. I want to say it was in the US, clay court. Was it South Carolina? Not too sure. Shelton played some great tennis. I think he even won the title there, but hasn't really been able to find that consistent form since, I'll say, the last few months when we're looking at quarters, semis, let alone finals consistently. So look, Shelton maybe third round of 16, but I want to see more before I say, quarterfinals or further. or Alyssa May's fallen to Navone. So Navone, 7-6, 7-6. So Felix is the same. Played phenomenal tennis end of last season, some earlier this season. Absolutely could potentially make a quarters or semis, but we've seen a little bit of a regression lately. So again, it's really going to depend on those earlier rounds, how well he's pulling it together. Look, but Shelton Felix, probably a little bit underrated going into Paris, it will be. But they're two players that we know can cause upsets of some of the best players in the world. I'm not going to say a Sinner or an Alcaraz, although Alcaraz is out, we do know that. But I think you need to give them both a shot of progressing. And look, with Alcaraz not in the way, it's going to be very interesting, but a discussion I'll leave to later. All right, Medvedev over Fonseca. So that's an upset. 3-6, 6-3, 7-6. Bellucci over Echeverry is an upset. 5-7, 6-2, 6-3. Landaluce over Silic. It's an upset too, 4-4. Koboli over Adame, 6-3. Taranto over Norrie, 3-5. Liamas Ruiz has upset Mute, 6-4, 3-6, 7-6. Medvedev got a walkover over Macaque, which it's a bit tough there, especially with getting the win over Tsitsipas it was, and then walkover. So lucky for Medvedev. Mazzetti over Mapeshi Pericard, 4-4. We like that. I think you really need to give Mazzetti his chances in Paris to make the top 8, maybe the semis, purely because there is no Alcaraz, and I think that really opens up a section of the draw. But again, we'll leave that till later. Surundolo over Tabillo, 6-love, 6-2. Rudd over Shibata, 1-3. Lehecka over Struff, 7-6, 6-3. Kakanakov over Shevchenko, 4-4. Kokovic over Van der Schulp, that's an upset there, 6-2, 2-6, 6-7. My apologies, I just read that the opposite way around. Van der Schulp got the win over Kokovic, 2-6, 6-2, 7-6. Humbert over Capriva, 3-2. Now look, this is an upset. Prismic qualified, got the win over Djokovic, 2-6, 6-2, 6-4. However, head on over to AIM International, look for the archives. There's a write-up on Prismic a few seasons ago about his potential there. And we're seeing it now, which is really, really nice to see. Look, this set is a 3-setter. I think Djokovic, I'm not too sure if he's playing anything prior to Paris. That said, you can't rule Djokovic out. And if he gets the draw, if he's on the other side of the draw to Sinner, you can't even rule Djokovic out to make the finals with Sinner if he plays well. Obviously, a result like this doesn't really work in his favour. But if Djokovic tracks, absolutely, semi-finals, here we come potentially, right? If not, if there's that early exit and with no Alcaraz there, it really widens the field. Zverev has the best opportunity of, well, I won't say his career, but a very good chance again to make the finals of the French. But again, we know he's regressed slightly, which we will get to shortly. But there's a lot of interesting dynamics here at play, similar to the WTA Tour. All right, Analdi over Demnor, big upset there, 4-6, 7-6, 6-4. Big opportunity for Alex potentially, depending again what side of the draw he is on. So I'm really, I'll say, hanging out for to see how the draw does unveil, to see who has the best chance. Joda over Borges, 7-6, 6-4. Teen over Zamir, 2-1. Bublik over Baez, 1-2. Paul over Vukic, 4-2. Darderi over Halfman, 4-4. Blocks has upset Greekensport, 6-7, 6-3, 6-4. Zverev with a win over Altamar. All right, on to the third round. I think most of the results we're going to see are straightforward, but we still do have a number of upsets. All right, Sinner over Poprin, 6-2, 6-love. Pellegrino, the qualifiers, upset Tiafoe, 7-6, 6-1. Rublev has upset Dowdich Fokina 6-4, 6-4. Now, recall how well he was playing last season. So this is a very good metric. I like this for Rublev, but it's very hard, I'll say, to ascertain Dowdich Fokina, how well he's going to play at the French. But I don't want to write him off because we've seen him play some really good tennis. But I'm not going to be surprised again if he pushes to the round of 16. Again, I want to see, I will say, those earlier results, see how that pans out. All right, Bashvili's upset Nakashima, 7-6, 6-4. Medvedev over Navone, 4-6, 6-3, 4. Landaluce over Beluce, that's an upset there, 4-3. Tarante's upset Caboli, 3-4. Now, that's, I will say, something to consider, because we know how well Caboli played a fortnight ago, how well he played in Rome, and he hasn't been able to maintain that level of maintenance, so that new baseline. Look, I still think Caboli could make a good run, make the round of 16 in Paris with this form. But with an early exit like this, makes me a little bit unsure if he could push past that. All right, Medvedev over Lemez Ruiz. It was tight 3-6, 6-4, 6-2. Mazzetti over Cirandolo, 7-6, 6-4. And Rudd's upset Lehecka. Look, on paper, Rudd's 23rd seed, Lehecka's 11th seed. But we know Rudd's been a finalist before at the French Open. Keep that in mind. I think that's often forgotten. And I think, look, I'm not too sure, but I think he was a finalist when Nadal played. Look, it's a long time ago now. But let's see if I can quickly get the results there. Not too sure if it's going to come through. It would be nice if it did come through. There we go. All right, 22nd French Open, Rudd lost to Nadal. 23rd French Open lost to Djokovic. And how's this? 22 US Open actually lost to Alcaraz. So that's 3 finalist results, it appears. And granted that, what I really like about this is, granted, I think that, Alcaraz is not playing. You really need to give Rudd just wow, just maybe. But look, a lot of things are going to depend on how the draw does pan out at the French Open. Obviously, if Rudd's end up in, I will say, Sinner's half, maybe not so much, but when you take one of the 2 best players in the world out of the equation, you're really opening that up. If Djokovic, we haven't really seen him play much this season or the last, let's say, month or 2, so we can't really gauge that. But we know he saves his best for the Grand Slams. We know that. But if there is an early exit, that actually leaves an opening that we have not seen for some time now. So I think that is very, very interesting in and of itself. Gives an opportunity we have not seen for some time. All right, moving down now. Kakanakov over Van der Zandschulp, 5-7, 6-4, 6-4. Prismic keeping that form over Humbert, which is a really good metric for him, 6-1, 7-5. Joda over Analdi, 6-1, 4-6, 6-3. Teen over Bublik, so that's an upset there. Well done, Teen. 4-6, 6-3, 7-5. Darderi over Paul, bit brutal, because we know Paul's going to regress in the rankings with the number of points he had to defend from last season. But Darderi's been playing some good tennis. 3-6, 6-3, 6-2. Zverev over Blocks, 6-1, 6-4. All right, round of 16 now, and we do have some more upsets to go over. All right, Sinner over Pellegrino, 2-3. Rublev over Bashashvili, 3-6, 7-6, 6-2. Really like how Rublev's playing. Maybe, just maybe, this new baseline we've been seeing the last couple of weeks could get him back inside the top 10. Landaluce over Medvedev, it's an upset there, 5-4. Medvedev over Tarante, 3-2. Rudd over Mazzetti. So look, it's an upset, very big upset, but to me it highlights Rudd's finding that form again that made him a 3-time finalist, 3-1. So this is why I'm really liking Rudd's odds. If this is his new level, if he can maintain this into the French, maybe good things. But we haven't seen Rudd maintain this level since, I'm going to say, 2 seasons ago, roughly. All right, Kakanakov over Prismic. Well done to Kakanakov, 6-1, 7-6. Again, curious to see if Kakanakov can hold this form into the French or not. Similar to when he got into the top 10, was it earlier this season? But then he regressed slightly out. But look, he's still very, very close. Joe Dar has upset Teen 1 and 4, and Dairy has upset Zverev, and that's what I think is quite surprising because we know how well Zverev can play on the clay. But again, I don't want to write Zverev off because he absolutely has a chance to make the finals of Roland Garros again as well, depending where Zverev falls in the draw, Djokovic falls in the draw, Rudd falls in the draw, Sinner falls in the draw. It's very, very interesting as well. Similar to the WTA Tour, a lot of moving parts in play. Scoreline though for Darderi over Zverev, 1-6, 7-6, 6-love. That's huge. That is a big mental block, especially with Darderi snatching that second set. 12-10, mind you. Then to get bageled in the third, that's a big mental hurdle for Zverev. We don't typically see that. But interesting to see how he does recover. All right, quarterfinals. Sinner over Rublev, 2 and 4. Medvedev over Landaluce, 1-6, 6-4, 7-5. Rudd over Kakanakov, 6-1, 1-6, 6-2. I want to pay attention more to that scoreline because it wasn't just one side. Let's say it's up and down, but that's actually, I like that for Kakanakov. Getting a good set, 6-1 off Rudd, who's in form on the clay, makes me curious to see if Kakanakov pushes round to 16 quarters, if he has that in him. All right, Darderi then over Jadar. This has really opened it up with Zverev out, but not, I'll say, not a surprise. 7-6, 5-7, 6-love. So we only have one semi-final to go over. Look, Sinner Medvedev is in the third set. Sinner's up 4-2, as I shared very beginning of today's episode. Look, odds are Sinner's going to get through because there is a break. He is up a break. That said, look, maybe, who knows? But what I like is that Medvedev's made the semis. Regardless, he may make the finals, but let's say the semis here, very good going into the French. Just put him back inside the top 10 more comfortably. Round of 16 quarters, potentially. Let's see what Medvedev can do let's say if he holds his cool. Rudd Darderi in the other semi-final. Rudd very convincing over Darderi, 6-1, 6-1. This is what I like. It's really putting Rudd in contention, I think, if the draw plays in his favour. Curious to see how the final does play out. If it goes to 3, if it's lopsided, it'll tell us some. But really, if Rudd's in the opposite draw of Sinner, it would be very interesting to see. You can't rule Rudd out for a quarterfinal position at the French. Maybe a semi. Let's see how he plays. But again, very curious. All right, that is Rome. We're lingering on one semi-final, but again, similar to WTA Tour, those we won't see the finals play out for another, let's say, 48 hours. And today, as promised, is all about, I will say, being up to date, 200, doing that full circle 3-year mark, which brings us to the live rankings. So these will be reflected when the rankings are updated, let's say 48, 72 hours from now. But it brings us to, look, just noteworthy is Wawrinka's at 119, just to keep that. But when we look at the top 100, Vukic is there, just back one, but that's where we're starting. Look, some big jumps. We've got, look, Navarre is up 11 to 97. Arnaldi is up 10 to 96, but he has been top 30 before. So there has been a bit of a regression lately. Offner's back 9 to 91. Not many players, I will say, on the ATP Tour where we're looking at big jumps. But look, Hercax, he's taken a bit of a hit again, back 26 places to 79 in the world. Mpeshi Pericard's actually taken a hit too. Former top 30, back 18 places to 76. Normally, I would say he's a shoo-in. He'll make second, third round, maybe be a bit of a danger in Paris, but really hasn't shown the same form he showed, I'll say, on the clay last season. That was really when he had his breakthrough. Draper's taken a big hit again, back 25 places to 75 in the world. Draper's going to be a tough one, I think, come Paris, because he's not going to be seeded. a little bit brutal, I think, for whoever faces Draper first, second, third round, especially third round playing another seeded player. That's going to be very interesting, especially with that new teaming up. I don't think Murray's joining him until the grass court, but also I'm not 100% if Draper is playing on the clay. Maybe he's holding off for Wimbledon, but let's see. A little bit unclear there. All right, Bellucci's up 9 to 71. Prismic, look, new career high ranking, up 9 places to 70 in the world. Keeping in mind, he's only 20 years of age from Croatia. Look, a lot of movement, predominantly small, but look, Landalucci's on a new high, so he's up 28 places to 66 in the world. Kekimic is up 8 to 62. So a lot of just minor movements. Look, Tarante, up 13 places to 56 in the world. Medvedev is up 13 places to 54 in the world. Both new career highs there. But again, keep in mind, these are the live rankings. Look, Macaque, he's up 1, but he's at 40, so he will not be seeded. I'll say maybe a little bit of a dark horse in those earlier rounds. Maybe not with how he's been playing. That's let's see how that plays out. I don't want to say too much there. All right, top 30. Look, Shapovalov is just outside there, similar with Macaque, so they will not be seeded. Same with Michelson, won't be seeded. So it could cause some problems in those earlier rounds as well. Look, Mute, he's back 2, but at 32. Looks like the seeding should cut off there. Fonseca looks like he will be seeded as well. Jadar, he's actually up 5 places to 29 in the world. So he will be seeded for the first time, all going well, in Paris, which will be a very big milestone. Look, Paul's back 7 to 25 in the world, but still be seated at the French. Curious again to see if he makes inroads or not. Dariusz Fokina, look, he's steady at 23. Again, curious to see what happens in Paris if he finds that form again that got him inside the top 15. I think that was earlier this season, or maybe it was late last season. As far as the rankings are concerned, it looks like Rudd, with obviously his finalist result, he's up 8 places to 17 in the world. If he does, I will say, snatch the title, if he does secure it, he'll go, I think, top 15 in the world if he can manage to beat, whether it's Sinner or Medvedev who makes the final. But look, still within reach, but still a little bit, I'm hoping that he does progress, because then he won't meet another top 16 player until the round of 16. But if not, in the round of 32, so third round in Paris, he could meet a top 16 player, which obviously his odds are then lowered slightly more. All right, a little bit of movement. Lehecka's is back 1, Rublev's up 1. Other players, we've got Mazzetti's just back 1. Mazzetti's actually been bumped outside the top 10. Bublik's inside the top 10. Not too many implications there as far as, I'll say, Paris and the draw is concerned. De Minaur's actually back 1. Medvedev's up 1. However, if Medvedev does progress, it looks like potentially he will, top maybe 7, top to 7, maybe 6. Not too many implications as far as the draw's concerned, but yes, when you're considering quarterfinals, for example, not so much around a 16, but quarterfinals, who's on what side of the draw, that could be somewhat interesting there, how that does play out. No real changes as far as order of the top 5. You've still got Felix at 5, Djokovic there. Zverev, he's still ahead by 1,000 points. Djokovic, between Djokovic and Zverev. Alcaraz obviously has dropped 1,000, but still 3,000 points between the two. Sinner could potentially add an extra, we got 600, I think, to his ranking. He's pretty comfortable there, I will say, at this stage. But there's a big gap, especially when you're considering, Wimbledon. Even if he does not play, if he drops those points, he's still looking pretty comfortable towards the hard court swing to hold on to that number 1. Oh my goodness, what a mouthful. We have, big episode today. Look, that's all the data when we're looking at the rankings. What I want to do now, we've got all the players, WTA, ATP Tour, as far as the predictive analytics are concerned for Paris, we have so many players that are actually in contention because WTA Tour aside, you've got a number of players in form, some that are starting to find their form, which is more interesting. ATP Tour, a couple of players now in form, a couple who are finding their form. But so it also means on both tours, a number of players who may regress further. But look, top 16 are looking pretty solid once Rudd joins that top 16. But look, odds are maybe 10 of the top 16, if we're lucky, will make the round of 16. So if you do the, I'll say, deductions, you deduce those results, then you're still going to see 6 of the current top 16 at a minimum will not track through to the round of 16, which already shows big upsets potentially. And that's just a ballpark, all right? So odds are you will not see 16 of 16. You will see less than that. There's typically very rarely 100% turnover. You will see an 80, but predominantly an 80% churn rate there, like positive. So again, I'm looking forward to seeing how those earlier rounds play out so I can gauge current metrics, performances, which gives me a lot to go by if those players are set for those 16s or quarter semis or beyond. As far as I will say Grand Slam finalists and champions are concerned, I'm still WTA Tour in the mix, and this is the data talking. You've still got Sabalenka, Rybakina, Swiatek, Gauff, Pegula actually and Anisimova are still all inside the window as far as the predictive analytics are concerned. No surprises if any one of those 6 does go on to win a Grand Slam. Paolini actually is still in those metrics. Andreeva and Svitolina, not so much. Andreeva, though, is just shy. I'm actually going to put her in that mix to give her a 7. Those top 7 players are actually, it will not be surprised. So you've got 7 potential contenders to win a Grand Slam. Actually 8 if you put Paolini into the mix to win a Grand Slam on the WTA Tour. That's actually a very big, very significant big pile. All right. ATP Tour is very different. You obviously Alcaraz out of the mix, but you need to put Sinners there. Zverev actually is there as far. This is again the data talking is there. You still need to put Djokovic there, but Fritz is actually there as well. But that's it. Only those 4 players. Rudd is a maybe because he has been a finalist before. But it's a very big maybe. Same with Medvedev, very big maybe, because it's been a few seasons since they were finalists. So again, Sinner, Zverev, Djokovic and Fritz, because you're looking at recent Grand Slam champion, recent Grand Slam finalists. But you could potentially, and this is a very big maybe, if you're looking at Grand Slam semi-finalists, ready for those breakthroughs, for example, Felix is a maybe. Look, Shelton again is a maybe. Mazzetti, I think, is a maybe, but that's really all right? So you've got a larger sample on the WTA Tour over the ATP Tour. You've got more players on the WTA Tour who have been playing, let's say, top 10 tennis. Whereas on the ATP Tour, you actually have essentially 50% less when you're actually looking at the rate of consistency where they've either won a Grand Slam, made a Grand Slam final, or consistently appeared, let's say, semi-finals, or made a final Grand Slam final in the last, say, 2, 3, 4 seasons. And granted, Sinner, Alcaraz have been dominating, followed by Zverev, Djokovic. That's really cut that off. Fritz is the, look, he's made a final, right? So he was that anomaly breaking through there, which puts him there, but that was on hard court, not on clay. So a lot of interesting metrics there. And again, why I think it's going to be very hard to stay away from sharing more in the, let's say, coming weeks. All right, before we do wrap up number 200, before I do say, I will say loosely goodbye, 3 years. It has been an absolute whirlwind, an absolute pleasure. But again, I'm sure I will be back in some way, shape or form. AIM International will go on as always. Everything will be there. It'll just, let's say, less between Beyond Top 10 as the episodes produced. And if there are future episodes, which, you know, part of me is saying there most absolutely will be, they will take on a different form, something else. But let's wind back the clock to 3 years ago, that number 1 episode on welcome and the coach-parent relationship. I hope you do take a walk back memory lane. Recall The Secrets to Optimal Performance Success, the book that we did focus on, and then later on The Secrets to Optimal Coaching Success. If you have not read one or the other of them, or both, please do. Along with all my other texts, that would be very exciting on our end here. But look, talent identification, mental health, player behavior, performance expectation, learning, adolescent injuries, jarring the body, motivation, rate of progress, mindfulness, functional movement. They're just some of, I think, those first 30 episodes. Just having a quick recollection there. All right, moving forward, the next batch we had the single sport interactions. Are you proud of yourself? Skill development, education, purpose, the warm-up, sweat, hydration, body image. Little things you can learn there, but keeping in mind from respect, fair play, lots of things. When we revisited the coach-athlete relationship, really big and powerful insights there. Moving on to the next batch, we had reading and its applicability, actually, the power of song, age interactions, persistence, gender interactions, public speaking, new book launches, and then I think around episode 60, 70, special editions around, the Australian Summer of Tennis. Then we started to break down week in, week out. So I think around episode 120 was when we started to do the week in, week out analyses, and how when we did the week in, week out analyses along with the Grand Slam special editions, I shared with you in real time what was happening as far as on tour that given week. And I think around episode 9, or no, that's incorrect, around episode, this is a tricky one, whereas it's confused me now, but that's okay. Well, we started to introduce around episode 100, I think, the live feeds. But again, really keeping in mind with week in, week out, sharing with you what's been happening on tour at any given week. So for the most part of 2 years then, it really was all about what's been going on every single week on tour. And then I think roughly we started around 6 months ago, for example, coming to you every fortnight when I was really deep in my latest manuscript, which again, I'll keep that exciting news for future updates I'll share, let's say, on AIM International. But look, I'll leave it there. It's been an absolute privilege. I really hope I'm going to be back. I think I will be, in some way, shape or form. I think you know that I'm really hesitating to sign off. It's a tricky one. But 3 years of sharing with you almost, I'll say, every single week, sometimes twice a week in the beginning. And then last couple of months, last 6 months, we wound it back to every fortnight, for example. Around Christmas, I think I had that first break that went for 3-4 weeks, for example. But I would argue that it has been consistent. Boy, there's a lot of data there. You can track the best players in the world from who was peaking 2 years ago, who we were tracking. The books I've written along the way from my tennis black book, remember that was Federer, Nadal, Serena, Djokovic. That was the title of my tennis workbook, that journal designed for each and every one of you to track goals, progressions, your results, strengths of your opponents, weaknesses of your opponents, essentially your tennis Bible that should go with you every single training session, for example. You can work on that with yourself, with your coach, with your hitting partners, etc. All the toolkits there in your black book, for example, what episodes to start on from the earlier ones to topics to look at each and every week. And I'm just turning around now so I can look at all my other books. So I'm trying to keep the mic close. But, the What Is Your Game Missing series, even the Wellbeing book there, the research, if you want to dive into that, there's one there, How to Develop a Top 10 Tennis Ranking. That is a big text to really dive into. The 8th key revealed in there, the 7 keys in its own book was really, really powerful, and how the 7 keys plus that 8th key really will allow your game to progress towards a top 10 ranking. And that's the science talking. That is the data talking. It's the first of its kind. And look, I'm so proud that my work, AIM International, has been able to bring that to the tennis world, the landscape there, and how Beyond Top 10 Tennis has really been able to voice that. I've been able to share over the last 3 years how to get towards a top 10 ranking, how you can do that if you're 15 years of age, 10 years of age, 25 years of age, the data there, even the one of the workbooks there, the names, I'm Your Tennis Coaching Guru, that book, The Science of Elite Performance, there's so many there, the What Is Your Game Missing series, the Science of Elite Performance, there's 13 there to go over, and how they essentially will hold your hand to get you to the pinnacle of play. And again, how Beyond Top 10 Tennis has given a voice to them, shared with you the applications of the data of all the players inside the top 10 at any given stage over the last 3 years, barrier breakers, all of that and more. It has been a lot. There is so much jam-packed there across, I guess, all Grand Slams over the last couple of seasons as well, that I've been able to give you a special editions deep dives in. I think if I kept talking to you about every single prior 199 episodes, we could be here for a few hours, but I won't do that. I'm going to sign off now. So look, it has been an absolute privilege. Thank you so much for listening. And look, to grab a copy of any one of my 14 books, because there is that fiction one in there, there will be another release, another non-fiction book coming out. I'm going to say in this season, let's say this season, 1 to maybe 3 months. Fiction-wise, it may turn into 2 additional fiction books, which, oh my goodness, I think that will bring by the end of the season, maybe that my tally to 17. I don't want to get too ahead of myself, but you can see how busy I've been, oh my goodness. But look, you can find them on AIM International or Amazon, so irrespective where you are based in the world. As always, irrespective, live or not, any comments or questions, come on over, head to AIM International or Topic Thread, which is under works to be redeveloped. I'll say in the next, or let's say later this season, I've got a lot on my plate. Leave comments directly on YouTube or Spotify, and I will still make an effort to review them, get back to them if or when I can. And interact with Beyond Top 10 Tennis, catch up on our blogs, or sign up to my newsletter. Again, head to AIM International. And look, remember to check out Pink Octopus Books to Sprue. And as always, look, if you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, like, share, and all of the above. Beyond Top 10 Tennis exists for you, so please consider sharing us near and far. The more you do that, the more of a nudge you will give me to come on back and to start potentially a new series, see what that next chapter is for Beyond Top 10 Tennis. As always, if you are serious about heading towards the top 10 or want to know what you're missing to secure that major Grand Slam or more, don't be shy. Come and say hi. Come and introduce yourself. Get in touch with AIM International. I am still open. I'm still there, opening up my schedule for that more specifically now So if that is you, if you're looking to get to the top 10, maintain top 10, push further at the Grand Slams, please do get in touch. So look, on that note, it has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for listening. I am so incredibly grateful from the bottom of my heart. I'm your host, Dr. Ashley Morgan Berge, and this is Beyond Top 10 Tennis, and I really do hope I'll see you next time, and there will be a next time very soon. Thank you so much, and I will say goodbye for now.